Since the Trump election win, the mainstream media has been frothing at the mouth. They went all in on this one, leaving behind any remote semblance of non-partisan reporting. And they lost. I think some are coming to realise that they no longer have control over the dominant narrative. The New York Times posted a letter from its editor to its readers promising to rededicate the Times to honest journalism, reflecting all political perspectives. Whether they'll follow through with this is yet to be seen, but others have been doubling down on their clear bias. The BBC interviewed Joe Pollock, senior editor at Breitbart, about Steve Bannon, who is the executive chair of Breitbart, who has just been appointed as Trump's chief strategist.
He doesn't like Jews, does he?
That's 100% false. I mean, absolutely false. I'm surprised you would repeat a lie like that.
Well, hang on a second.
On your air.
Hang on a second. His ex-wife is quoted as saying, in a court document, as saying he doesn't like Jews. He told her he doesn't like the way they raise their kids to be whiny brats. He doesn't want his girls going to school with Jews.
Are you divorced?
No.
Have you known anyone to go through a divorce?
So you're suggesting it was because she didn't like him?
I think that's a fair assumption.
Yeah,
I think also that I've worked with him. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I observe the Sabbath. I eat kosher food. I have time off for all the Jewish holidays. I've worked with Steve Bannon. Hold on a second. You've made an inflammatory accusation. I hope you'll allow me to respond. I've worked with Steve Bannon in close quarters for 5 years. Steve Bannon not only has never said anything against Jews or any other person, but has in fact been overly sensitive toward concerns affecting Jewish communities around the world.
Okay.
So in fact, your statement is actually libelous and defamatory.
I hear what you say about that. Let me put to you another sentence, a sentence that was in a Breitbart report recently about the newspaper columnist who's well known in Britain, Anne Applebaum. Hell hath no fury like a Polish, Jewish, American elitist scorn. What's the purpose of the word Jewish in there?
I don't know. You should ask the Jewish author of that sentence.
But what do you think it was?
I have no idea. You should ask the Jewish author, and you should ask the Muslim editor who edited that piece.
So can you not see that?
What's the implication?
Well, I take it...
So identifying someone as Polish and American is not prejudicial, but Jewish is. I mean, the point is you're cherry-picking a sentence written, by the way, by a Jewish author, in case I haven't said it enough, and you're accusing that Jewish author of anti-Semitism. I mean, you're going to have to go some way towards substantiating that claim a little bit more effectively.
No, I'm not accusing you of anti-Semitism. I'm just saying it's a strange sentence. That word
you
Jewish
are
doesn't seem
accusing it of anti-Semitism because that's the implication of your question. Just like you said, Steve Bannon doesn't like Jews.
I'm just wondering what the purpose.
Have you got anything else? Have you got anything else?
I'm just wondering what the purpose of the attribution Jewish is in that sentence.
Well, what's the purpose of lying about somebody on the airwaves in Britain? You want to scare British people away from the incoming Trump administration by inventing innuendo and accusations? I mean, I don't know if this is the standard of journalism in Britain. I did expect that.
Let's turn to the wider point about him, which is that he is an angry person, Steve Bannon, that the website is angry, and that isn't necessarily the right approach to bring into the White House, to bring into government.
Somewhat partisan, isn't it? And even Davis used the same quote later that day. Huffington Post ran a headline calling Steve Bannon a white nationalist, and then this was echoed on Channel 4.
Do you think your erstwhile boss, Steve Bannon, chairman of Breitbart and now Trump's chief strategist, do you think he has horribly regressive attitudes? He's been described by some liberals an anti-Semite, a white nationalist. Have they got that wrong?
Well, Breitbart is a company staffed almost entirely by Jews. I am a gay Jew, and he made me into a star. He, flew over from America to hire Raheem Kassam to run the London office, who is a, brown-skinned Muslim. This stuff is ridiculous.
Milo Yiannopoulos there, going against the mainstream narrative, and instantly coming under attack from Labour MP Anna Turley, who seems to think that violence is an acceptable response to dealing with people who disagree with you politically. I'll tell you what, if Steve Bannon is a white nationalist, he's doing a very bad job of it putting Raheem Kassam in charge of his London office. Now, I'm not opposed to political appointments receiving scrutiny, but there's such incredible double standards here. Do you remember any such scrutiny when Obama appointed Clinton as Secretary of State? This was before the email and Benghazi scandals, but still at the time she had been involved with Travelgate, Cattlegate and Whitewater, to name but a few. And if we're talking white supremacy...
My friend and mentor, Robert C. Byrd.
That aside, with attacks on Bannon, there is no real discussion about policies. It's just, how can we label him as a bigot? I'll post a link below to him talking at length about economics. Worth a listen if you want to hear from him directly. I'm glad the whole labelling him as a bigot without much proof thing isn't really working. Most people aren't buying this rubbish anymore. But But what I'm not pleased to see is the left's response. Here's John Oliver.
But for tonight, let's look at just one narrow element that may have helped bring us here, because it will be important going forward, and that is our media. Specifically, how a system that is supposed to catch a serial liar failed. And I'm not just referring to mainstream TV news, although some did wait far too long to take Trump seriously, giving him billions of dollars worth of free media. CNN, for instance, sometimes ran his speeches almost in their entirety, and their president, Jeff Zucker, now admits that might not have been such a great idea.
I'd say that if we made a mistake last year, it's that we probably did put on too many of his campaign rallies in those early months, unedited and just let them run. And I think in hindsight, we probably shouldn't have done that as much.
Yeah, it turns out hindsight, much like the year we're all now desperately looking forward to, is 2020.
Yep, so the problem was, on occasions early on, they played what he was actually saying unedited. Let's crack down on that! And the crackdown is well underway. Google and Facebook are trying to crack down on, quote, fake news. Well, who gets to decide what is and isn't fake news? As we've just shown, the BBC, Huffington Post, Guardian, Channel 4 repeat paper-thin accusations of racism. Are they fake news, or is it just outlets that report alternative perspectives? Google and Facebook have already been criticised heavily for having a revolving door policy with the Obama administration, and there's a fair degree of evidence that Facebook has been censoring conservative views. Someone also showed me this very strange thing with Google. If you type into Google Images, black man, black woman, you get photos of black couples. If you type in Asian man and Asian woman, you get photos of Asian couples. But if you type in white man and white woman, every single couple is interracial. Now, it's difficult not to sound like a conspiracy theorist when you see stuff like this. Why would Google do that? Well, I'll do a separate video at some point on the left and identity politics, but I think it's safe to say it would be advisable never to assume that any company is truly politically neutral. Some might be biased in other ways, but it's just something we need to be aware of, rather than just take what we hear and see at face value. And if we do that, then we can protect ourselves from fake news, rather than have someone, who may well be extremely politically biased, decide for us. I'll post a link below about how Google allegedly manipulated search results for Clinton during the election. A lot of people are leaving Twitter at the moment and joining sites like Gab and Minds, which are currently seen as being more tolerant of free speech and expression. How's the share price doing, Twitter? Maybe you should have thought about that before all the shadow bans. We also just had the European Commission publish a report on the UK's press. Why is this any of their business? The report advocates for the establishment of a press regulator to crack down on offensive and biased information. It seems to just refer to tabloids there, so no reference to the bias I talked about earlier. And look, City University, for which I'm ashamed to say I went to, has just voted to ban certain newspapers that they consider to be fascist. Fascism is the suppressing of opposing views. This is insanely hypocritical. If you don't like these papers, fine, don't buy them, but banning them, that's fascist. The headlines The Guardian chose there to show the dreadful tabloids relate to the papers criticising the High Court's ruling that Parliament must vote on triggering Article 50. Personally, I haven't got anything against the judges making the ruling they did. I would have preferred if no one had raised the case in the first place, but I'm okay with their decision. We'll just get Brexit through Parliament, as MPs don't want a civil war. That's not to say the judges are beyond criticism. All four of the judges had explicit links to the EU, and of course the Guardian is happy to criticise judges when it sees fit. I'll end on a positive note. I think the mainstream media, or perhaps we should now call it the legacy news media, is now dying, and it's letting out its final death rattles. While I am concerned about further online controls, I think the nature of the internet will mean people will keep moving around and sharing knowledge in ways that have never been possible in the past. The best thing we can do is to never take any source of news at face value, read as many different sources as possible, don't give lying companies your money, and call out hypocrisy wherever you see it. And by all means, please check everything I say. There is no reason why you should assume I'm telling the truth.